Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is to say nothing at all, not out of fear, not out of weakness, but out of strength, clarity, and grounded self-awareness. In a world that constantly urges us to explain ourselves, defend our choices, and perform for approval, there's a rare power in simply focusing on our own growth and staying quiet. Silence is not passive. It's an act of radical courage when the noise around you demands your reaction. Focusing on yourself is not selfish. It's responsible. It's knowing that the only thing you can truly control is how you show up in your work, your relationships, your healing. It's resisting the urge to fix others, argue your worth, or trade authenticity for acceptance. Silence isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about choosing peace over chaos, depth over drama. It means letting go of the need to be understood by everyone, especially those who are committed to misunderstanding you. Your self-work? That's sacred. It doesn't require an audience. And the most powerful transformations happen quietly when no one is watching. And so focus, do the work, heal, set boundaries. And when people try to drag you into noise, into gossip, comparison, or performative success, stay silent. Because not everything deserves your energy. And not everyone is ready for your truth. There's a cultural narrative that tells us silence is synonymous with powerlessness. That if we don't speak up, clap back, or correct others, we are somehow losing. That silence means you're unsure, intimidated, or even defeated. But what if silence isn't weakness at all? What if silence is actually a deeply intentional form of courage? One that signals we are rooted, not reactive. Silence, when chosen with clarity, is not withdrawal, it's restraint. It's the difference between reacting from a place of wounded ego and responding from a place of integrated strength. When we're triggered, our first instinct might be to defend, explain, or retaliate. But strength is often measured in what we don't say, in the space we create between the stimulus and our response. There's a moment when you feel the pull to prove something, to make your case, to be heard, to be right. But choosing not to engage in that moment doesn't mean you're surrendering. It means you're discerning. You're no longer driven by the urgency to be validated by others. You've learned that not every opinion deserves your correction, and not every misunderstanding is your burden to fix. Strength in silence comes from knowing who you are so well that external noise doesn't destabilize you. You don't flinch every time someone challenges you because your self-worth isn't hanging in the balance. You understand that inner peace is not a product of everyone agreeing with you. It's the result of you agreeing with yourself. There's also a misconception that strength looks loud, assertive, and confident on the outside. But real strength is quiet. It's the woman who walks away from drama instead of winning the argument. It's the man who listens before he speaks. It's the leader who pauses before reacting. It's the parent who breathes through frustration instead of yelling. Silence in these moments isn't about being passive. It's about being in control of yourself. This kind of silence is deeply self-aware. It doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from emotional intelligence. It asks, what is actually needed here? And more often than not, the answer is stillness. Listening, presence. These are things that require far more emotional bandwidth than a quick reaction or a defensive comeback. And let's be honest, staying silent in the face of provocation is not easy. It's tempting to make a point, to correct the record, to show people they're wrong about you. But what if strength is choosing yourself over that momentary gratification? What if true power is walking away, knowing that your energy stayed with you, not scattered among other people's projections? When you master the discipline of silence, you stop giving people access to your inner world just because they're loud. You learn to trust your presence more than your performance. You recognize that silence isn't you shrinking, it's you standing tall in your own internal knowing. And while the world may never fully understand that kind of strength, you will, and that's what matters most. There's a narrative many of us have internalized that says putting ourselves first is selfish, that taking time to reflect, heal, set boundaries, or say no means we're being self-centered. But that's not selfishness, that's responsibility. Focusing on yourself, really truly focusing on your growth, healing, and values is one of the most responsible things you can do. Not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. You can't pour from an empty cup. And if your identity is rooted in people-pleasing, performing, or fixing others, you're constantly pouring yourself out in service of being liked or accepted. That's not sustainable. When you focus on yourself, you're saying, I matter too. You're acknowledging that your emotional and mental well-being are not optional extras. They're foundational. And when you're grounded in who you are, you're more capable of showing up for others in healthy, meaningful ways. Focusing on yourself means being honest about your patterns. It means asking hard questions like, what part of me is trying to prove something? Or why do I keep choosing what hurts me? This kind of inner work is not glamorous. It won't get you applause. In fact, some people might resist it because your growth forces them to look at their own stagnation. But that discomfort isn't your problem to fix. Your responsibility is to yourself first. It also means learning how to set and protect your boundaries. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries might call it selfish when you start focusing on yourself. But what they're really saying is, I miss the version of you that overextended for me. Don't let that guilt pull you away from your growth. Your healing might disappoint others, but it will liberate you. Self-focus also invites accountability. It's not about blaming the world or avoiding your own flaws. It's about saying, here's where I need to take ownership. True self-focus isn't about being the hero or the victim in every story. It's about stepping into emotional maturity. It requires reflection, not reaction. Introspection, not impulse. We often look outward for approval, advice, even identity, but real transformation happens inward. When you prioritize self-reflection, you learn to self-regulate, self-soothe, and self-direct. You stop relying on external circumstances to determine your mood or worth. That doesn't mean you become detached or disconnected. It means you become rooted. And rooted people don't get easily pulled into chaos. It's also worth noting, when you stop centering other people's needs, drama, or validation in your life, you free up an enormous amount of emotional space. That energy can be redirected into creativity, rest, healing, learning, into the kind of life that reflects your truth instead of your trauma. That's the quiet power of self-focus. It opens up possibility where there used to be depletion. And here's what's most powerful. When you begin to focus on yourself, you change your relationships too. You stop enabling. You stop performing. You stop betraying your own needs to keep the peace. And what you gain in return is peace that actually lasts. That's not selfish. That's self-responsibility. And it's the bravest, most life-giving thing you can do. There's a deeply human desire to be seen, known, and understood. We all want to be heard when we speak, and we often go out of our way to explain ourselves, our decisions, our boundaries, our past, hoping someone will finally say, I get it. But there comes a point when you realize not everyone is listening with the intent to understand. Some are listening to judge, to critique, or to confirm their own bias. And when that's the case, your explanations become emotional labor with no return. There's nothing wrong with wanting to clarify your intentions, especially with people who matter to you. But when you find yourself in a constant loop of defending your choices, over-explaining your boundaries, or trying to convince someone of your worth, that's a red flag. It means the relationship may be built more on control than connection. You don't owe explanations to people who are unwilling or even incapable of hearing you with empathy. Explaining becomes a trap when it's driven by the fear of being misunderstood. You think, if I can just explain it better, maybe they'll respect my decision. But some people aren't confused. They're committed to misunderstanding you because your growth disrupts their comfort. Your clarity threatens their control. And no amount of words will change a mind that doesn't want to change. This is where boundaries come in. Silence is not the absence of response. It's a boundary. When someone repeatedly questions your integrity, your values, or your healing, silence can be your way of saying, I'm no longer trying to prove myself here. That's not being rude. It's being free. You are not obligated to invite someone into your process if all they do is rearrange your truth to fit their story. When we explain ourselves too much, we start to outsource our self-worth. We look to others to validate decisions we've already made from a place of conviction. That's a slippery slope, because the moment you begin to seek permission for your truth, you risk abandoning it. And every time you betray your inner knowing just to avoid discomfort or disapproval, you chip away at your self-trust. The most liberating moment in any healing journey is when you realize you don't need everyone to understand you. You just need to understand yourself. You don't need everyone to agree with your path. You just need to be brave enough to walk it anyway. The right people, the ones who see you clearly, won't demand long explanations. They'll honor your growth, even if it challenges them. There will always be people who question you, distort your intentions, or say, you've changed like it's a bad thing. And maybe you have changed. Maybe you've started prioritizing peace over pleasing. Maybe you've begun living from alignment instead of fear. And maybe that makes others uncomfortable. But that's not your problem to solve. It's your truth to protect. So let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them misinterpret you if they must. You don't have to argue your worth. You don't have to draft paragraphs defending your decisions. You can release the need to be understood by people who are never. Authenticity is often misunderstood as full disclosure. All the time, to everyone. As if being a reals means spilling your deepest truths on command. But authenticity is not oversharing. It's not the constant broadcasting of your feelings. And it's definitely not about letting everyone have access to the most sacred parts of you. True authenticity is rooted in discernment. It's choosing what to share, when, and with whom based on trust, safety, and mutual respect. Boundaries are what protect your authenticity. Without them, your truth becomes vulnerable to misuse. You might be honest, yes, but if you're honest with people who only want to twist your words or weaponize your vulnerability, that's not empowerment. That's exposure. It's not a lack of courage to withhold your truth from those who haven't earned it. It's wisdom. Not everyone is safe for your story. There's a difference between secrecy and privacy. Secrecy is rooted in shame, hiding parts of yourself because you believe they're unworthy. Privacy is rooted in self-respect, choosing to protect your truth because it is worthy. Just because something is true doesn't mean it's for public consumption. Your pain, your growth, your process, those are not commodities. They're sacred. Boundaries say, this is mine to carry, not yours to analyze. They draw the line between healthy vulnerability and unhealthy exposure. They give you space to process before performing. They allow your truth to breathe and evolve without being judged in real time. And when you create that space, your authenticity becomes stronger, not weaker, because it's no longer reactive or people-pleasing. It's rooted. There's also this idea that honesty requires bluntness, but truth without empathy isn't brave, it's aggressive. And vulnerability without boundaries isn't authentic, it's chaotic. Authenticity is not about being loud. It's about being real in a way that's emotionally responsible. It requires you to be self-aware enough to ask, why am I sharing this? What outcome am I hoping for? And does this person have the capacity to receive it? Sometimes the most authentic thing you can do is not share. Not because you're hiding, but because you're honoring yourself. Sometimes your silence isn't avoidance, it's alignment. You can be radically honest with yourself and still choose silence with others. That doesn't make you fake. It makes you discerning. Emotional maturity is knowing when your truth needs to be spoken and when it needs to be held. And let's be clear, just because someone asks doesn't mean they deserve an answer. Just because someone is curious doesn't mean you're obligated to satisfy their curiosity. Your story is not a response to someone else's entitlement. Your truth is not required in every room you enter. Your job is not to be understood by everyone. It's to live in integrity with yourself. Authenticity without boundaries is self-abandonment disguised as openness. But when your truth is protected by strong, compassionate boundaries, it becomes something sacred, something powerful. And most of all, something that actually belongs to you, not everyone else.